It wasn't your money to keep, my father said, and 27 people at my Aunt Sharon's Easter table went quiet. In the previous 7 weeks, my parents had emptied $58,440.13 from my savings account ending in 2714, paid my father's tax debt, and left me with $46.82 in checking. By the end of that same week, they had told my relatives I was unstable, called my supervisor at Queen City Dental Billing, and tried to make the police believe I was the danger. Then, on the next Tuesday morning, a woman from Piedmont Community Bank knocked on my apartment door with a gray file box and asked if my mother had ever used my name at the Fairview branch. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Charlotte, North Carolina on Monday, March 4th, 2024. That morning began with the smell of burnt coffee and hot dust from the old baseboard heater under my apartment window. I was standing in my kitchen in navy scrubs with one shoe on and one shoe off, checking my accounts before rent hit, because routine had become its own kind of safety to me. I worked full-time in dental billing at Queen City Dental Billing. I took extra claim batches when the older staff wanted to leave early, and I had spent 4 years building that savings account one steady transfer at a time. I wanted a better apartment, my coding certification paid in cash, and proof that my future did not need my parents' permission. When people talk about controlling parents, they usually picture loud ones, dramatic ones, parents who break plates and scream in doorways. Mine were quieter than that, which made them harder to explain and easier for outsiders to excuse. My mother, Deborah Mitchell, was the kind of woman who could ask how much you had in savings with a soft smile and then make you feel rude for hesitating. My father, Ray Mitchell, owned a struggling auto shop on South Boulevard, and he had a habit of talking about family sacrifice whenever he wanted access to someone else's money. Some parents teach safety. Mine taught me to hide receipts. The oldest person in our orbit who never fell for their performance was Gloria Pritchard, my mother's church friend, who was 71 and wore lavender skirt suits like armor. Gloria had silver hair set high, a voice like crinkled paper, and a way of looking at a room that made lying feel cramped and childish. She had been around my family long enough to know that my mother used concern the way other people use threats, and every time Deborah praised me in public, Gloria's expression tightened just a little, as if she had heard the missing sentence underneath it. She once told me while handing me a plate at a church luncheon, "Your mother loves appearances more than she loves being known." That line sat inside me for 2 years before I understood how expensive it would become. There was also Daniel Ortiz, who worked 2 cubicles behind me at Queen City Dental Billing and never made himself the center of anybody else's pain. He brought his lunch in glass containers, wore clean white sneakers even on rainy days, and had the quiet habit of setting a bottle of water or a protein bar beside my keyboard when he saw I had skipped lunch again. We were not dating, we were not anything dramatic. He was just steady in a way that made me realize how exhausting my normal had been. People always imagine betrayal stories as a before and after. For me, the before had already been training. By early February, my mother had started asking questions that sounded casual if you did not know her. She wanted to know whether my little savings plan was still going, whether I had moved the account to another bank, whether I was still using the one on Fairview because it was closer to Daddy's shop if you ever needed help. I remember the exact way the kitchen light caught the ice in her sweet tea when she asked that last one. And I remember feeling the smallest twist in my stomach, like a key turning in a lock I did not want opened. On February 15th, she texted, "Proud of how responsible you've become." My mother almost never praised me without an invoice hidden behind it. That should have been the first alarm. On Monday, March 4th, at 8:12 in the morning, I opened my banking app and saw my savings balance sitting at $12.03. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, brightened it again, and checked twice to make sure I had not tapped the wrong account. Then I pulled up the transaction history and felt my mouth go dry. 9 in-person withdrawals over 7 weeks, 2 cashier's checks, 1 internal transfer. A chain of theft so calm and organized. It looked like somebody had been managing a household budget, not emptying a daughter's future. The Fairview branch smelled like lemon cleaner and stale carpet. And the young teller who helped me kept lowering his voice as if the walls might be loyal to somebody else. His name was Owen. He printed the slips one after another and slid them across the desk with both hands, like he was passing evidence through a church pew. On 3 of the withdrawal packets, clipped behind the signature pages, were scanned copies of my mother's driver's license. On one cashier's check for $18,600, the payee line read Internal Revenue Service. On another, for $11,000, it read Mitchell Automotive Tax Services. That was the moment theft stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like an answer. I drove to my parents' house in Matthews that night with the bank folder on the passenger seat and the window cracked because I felt like I could not breathe in my own car. Their split level always smelled faintly like furniture polish and fried onions, and my mother opened the door as if she had expected me hours earlier. She did not ask what was wrong. She looked at the blue bank folder and knew. My father came down the hall in his work shirt, still wearing grease under one thumbnail, and when I held out the slips and asked who had touched my account, neither of them denied it. My mother said, "We used what this family needed," and my father said, "You act like money raised you instead of us." I asked how they had even done it, and my mother said my name had always been easy enough to carry, because banks trusted older people more than girls who thought they knew everything. Then she said the line I still hear in the exact rhythm of her voice: "We were protecting you from yourself." I remember staring at the hallway mirror behind her and seeing all 3 of us reflected in it, each one smaller than the actual room. I had not shouted, I had not threatened, but the next words out of my father's mouth were, "If you make this ugly, you will regret it. There are sentences that close a chapter." That was one of them. Easter dinner at Aunt Sharon's house was 4 days later on March 31st, and I almost did not go. Daniel had told me that morning while handing me a plain white envelope with 3 photocopy shops circled on a map inside it. "If you go, go as a witness to yourself." So I went. Aunt Sharon's dining room was warm from the oven, smelled like pineapple glaze and brown sugar, and held 27 people who all seemed to sense the tension, but preferred their rolls buttered more than their truth told. Halfway through dinner, after my cousin Amber asked whether I had found a new apartment yet, my father set down his fork, looked directly at me and said, "It wasn't your money to keep." No one spoke for a full second, which is longer than people think when a room is full. My mother kept serving potatoes as if she were merely helping the meal along, and my aunt stared at the ham knife in her hand like it had betrayed her by reflecting too much. Then Gloria Pritchard placed her napkin beside her plate and said, very clearly, "Ray, leave the girl her dignity if you won't leave her the money." My mother looked at Gloria with that small church smile she used when she wanted to turn correction into a social problem and said, "We are handling a private family matter." That is how long it took them to make public cruelty sound responsible. Over the next 5 days, I received 14 calls and 9 texts from relatives who had suddenly found theology in my parents' crime. My uncle from Gastonia said I was tearing the family apart over money. A cousin I had not seen in 8 months texted that I should remember everything my parents had done for me. 2 women from church sent voice messages about honor, mercy, and keeping pain inside the home, as if silence were a virtue and not a hiding place. My mother sent a group text saying I had become fixated and emotionally unwell, which was her favorite kind of attack because it sounded compassionate if you read it fast. She was not protecting them, she was protecting her position. Then she escalated again. On Wednesday afternoon, my supervisor, Melissa Grant, called me into her office at Queen City Dental Billing and shut the door with both hands. The room smelled like copier heat and mint gum, and I knew before she said anything that my father had gotten there first. He had called pretending to be a concerned parent and told her I had been taking patient checks home because I was panicking over debt. Melissa did not accuse me, and I will always respect that. But she put me on temporary paid review while compliance checked everything. I walked out of her office feeling like I had been skinned in public while no one around me could see the blood. Daniel found me sitting in my car under the parking deck, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. He got in without asking, set 2 gas station coffees in the cup holders, and put a yellow legal pad on the console between us. At the top of the first page, he wrote March 4th in block letters and said, "Start with the first lie." That was all. Not a speech, not a rescue fantasy, just a dateline and a place to begin. Truth gets heavier every time you stack another page on it. The next day, with Daniel's notes and my bank packet in a folder that was already bending at the edges, I met Rebecca Sloan in her South End office. Rebecca was a civil attorney with blunt bangs, a navy dress, and the kind of stillness that made other people speak more carefully. She read every page without interrupting, then told me to stop responding to family messages except through counsel, freeze all accounts, request teller images and signature cards, file a police report, and send certified letters demanding preservation of all banking and communications records. By that afternoon, I had filed with Charlotte Mecklenburg Police, locked my credit, changed every password, and started a chronology that ran from February 15th through April 3rd, with times, names, amounts, and direct quotes. My parents believed drama could outrun documentation. They were wrong. On Friday night, my mother filed a false police report claiming I had threatened to damage my parents' garage and had been circling their street after midnight. Rebecca answered it before noon the next day with my office badge log, a grocery receipt timestamp, Daniel's parking receipt from the movie theater where we had gone after work, and my phone location history. My mother was not embarrassed by being disproved. People like her rarely are. She was angered by the existence of proof. Let me ask you something right here because this is the part I still think about. If the people who stole from you also had 30 years of family history to hide behind, how many lies would they need before your relatives admitted what they were seeing? I never got an answer from them. I just kept building the file. The following Tuesday morning, rain tapped against my apartment window in a thin, steady rhythm while I was eating toast over the sink, and that was when Denise Harper knocked on my door. She was a senior fraud investigator from Piedmont Community Bank, in a charcoal skirt and low black heels, carrying a gray file box with a silver clasp, and my mother's driver's license clipped to the front of one packet. Denise did not walk in like a dramatic witness from TV. She asked whether she should remove her shoes, thanked me for the chair, and opened the file the way a careful person opens something that will matter later. She told me the internal review had confirmed 9 unauthorized in-person withdrawals totaling $58,440.13, that my mother's identification had been scanned on 2 withdrawal dates, and that the March 15th cashier's check for $18,600 had been deposited to my father's business tax balance at 10:13 in the morning. Then Denise showed me something I had not expected. The bank had flagged a second pattern because my parents had tried one more withdrawal after the account was already nearly empty. And when the branch manager questioned it, my mother had said I was going through one of my spells and had asked whether a parent could still help manage things for an adult daughter. Denise said that phrase made the branch manager uncomfortable enough to escalate it. I remember looking at the photocopied signature line and feeling almost calm, because at some point the cruelty had become too detailed to personalize. Paper has no loyalty. That is why it tells the truth. Denise asked whether I wanted the bank to handle communications through my attorney from that point forward, and I said yes. Before she left, she handed me a printed reimbursement timetable and said, with total professional neutrality, "You were unusually organized, Ms. Mitchell. That made this much easier to verify." She had no idea what that sentence meant to me. My family had spent a week painting me as unstable, hysterical, dramatic, obsessive. An outsider who did not know our history had looked at the same pile of facts and seen discipline. 5 days later, after the 11 o'clock service at New Hope Fellowship, the fellowship hall was crowded with pound cake, styrofoam coffee cups, and the same relatives who had watched my father humiliate me at Easter dinner. I was standing near the dessert table with Gloria Pritchard, who smelled faintly of rose lotion and peppermint, when my mother began telling 2 women from choir that she was heartbroken by how far Lauren has taken this. She saw me, lowered her voice in that theatrical way people use when they want to be overheard, and added, "Some girls just don't know how to be grateful." Gloria's eyes narrowed so slightly most people would have missed it. She leaned toward me and murmured, "Stay still, baby. Truth walks on its own time." That was the exact moment Denise Harper stepped through the side doors carrying a cream folder and looking around for me with the polite concentration of someone trying not to interrupt strangers. She was there with her aunt, who apparently attended second service, and she had brought a corrected reimbursement packet because the first draft had omitted one fee the bank was covering. She smiled when she saw me and said, clearly enough for half the dessert table to hear, "Lauren, I'm glad I found you. We completed the review." The March 1st withdrawal for $12,000 used Deborah Mitchell's driver's license ending in 4291, and the March 15th cashier's check for $18,600 was deposited to Mitchell Automotive Tax Services at 10:13 that morning. Then she opened the folder and continued, "There were 9 unauthorized withdrawals in total, plus account fees and wage loss documentation your attorney submitted." No one in that room needed a speech after that. Gloria set down her coffee and said, in the kind voice older women use when they are offering someone one final chance to behave like a human being, "Would you read the dates again, honey? Folks were so certain. Denise, not understanding the family history and not needing to read each date, amount, and transaction type in her neat professional cadence, while spoons stilled in cups and chairs stopped scraping the floor. My father's face lost color so fast it looked like a light turning off behind his skin. My mother's mouth opened around the beginning of a sentence, then closed without finishing it. Silence can be more humiliating than confession when the room has already decided what it heard. After that, events moved in plain, quiet lines. The bank restored the full balance by April 25th, reimbursed the fees, and sent written notice that the matter had been referred to Mecklenburg County Financial Crimes. Rebecca filed a civil claim for my lost wages during the review period at work, and Melissa gave me a written statement that my father's allegations had been fully disproved by audit. I did not make a single explanatory post. I did not call cousins to clear my name. Word spread on its own through choir rehearsals, shared casseroles, parking lot murmurs, and the exact people who had once told me to keep the peace. Sometimes consequence arrives without being invited by the person who was harmed. Around 12:43 one night in May, my phone lit up with a blocked number, and when I answered, it was my father. He sounded tired in a way I had never heard before, stripped down and older, like all the theater had gone out of him at once. He said, "Your mother told me it would be temporary at first. After the second slip, I knew it wasn't borrowing anymore." It was the closest thing to truth he had offered me in my entire life, and even then it came shaped like a confession he hoped would cost less than the full thing. He was not redeemed by that call, but for the first time he sounded like a man standing in the ruins of his own excuses. I told him if either of them wanted any possibility of a future conversation, it would begin with the truth in writing, full repayment of my legal costs, and no more messages delivered through cousins, pastors, or church women who like to call manipulation mercy. Then I hung up and stood in my kitchen with the refrigerator humming behind me and realized I was shaking. Forgiveness has not arrived yet. I'm not sure when it will. Some doors should stay locked until the people outside them learn that knocking is not the same thing as entering. By June, I had moved into a small brick apartment off East Boulevard with squeaky floors, two narrow windows, and evening light that turned the kitchen gold around 6:30. On the first Friday after I got my keys, Daniel brought takeout from a Peruvian place on South Tryon and a tiny basil plant because he said everybody deserved one living thing on a first table. Gloria came in lavender again, carrying peach cobbler in a glass dish wrapped in two dish towels, and Melissa stopped by after work still wearing her badge lanyard and laughing about a billing error someone had made upstairs. We ate at my unfinished table with mismatched chairs and talked about traffic, coffee, and a terrible hymn arrangement from Sunday. No one asked me to understand my parents better. No one asked me to shrink the truth so other people could swallow it more easily. That is the ending I trust most now. Not reconciliation, not a dramatic apology at the door, just ordinary peace with people who chose to be there. I still check locks twice. I still keep copies of documents in labeled folders. I still feel my chest tighten when an unknown number calls too late at night. But when the dishes were done and the apartment smelled like sugar and roasted chicken and basil leaves crushed between fingers, I looked around that table and understood something my parents never did. Love that has to steal is not love, and family that survives only by lying deserves the silence it finally gets.